Okay, I think it's working. Let's see. Nice. Okay, so let me get started here. Alright, so might be wondering what I'm doing here. With all this mess on my screen. I'm kind of doing a whole bunch of things at once, so forgive me for my setup and all this concoction here. Alright, so first off, this video is basically highlighting the EVGA RTX 2070 XC edition, okay? Which would be this box right here. I hope you can see it. As you can see on here, it says XC, and it's an RTX EVGA RTX 2070 Black edition. Okay, XC Black, and that's the one that I got most recently. I also own a regular Black edition from a while back, and you can see 2070 here. And I also own a GeForce RTX 1080 Ti from Asus. Okay, and the reason why I'm showing you that is because I'm going to show you just a couple benchmarks from it. So that's the 3 cards here that I have that are from the RTX series. Alright, so what's the whole point of this video? Well, I ended up overclocking my EVGA RTX 2070 XC Black Edition. And as you can see here, well, my main, what I did basically was I started up FurMark, and what I wanted to do was get the FurMark up to 60 frames per second at 4K 2x AA. Okay, and as you can see here by this thing here, if you can read it, I got it up to 60 frames per second, and my score is 3580. And look at this. The GPU core went up to 2115, and the memory is running at 8200 megahertz. Now, I don't know if that's like a major thing or not, but that's the most I've ever overclocked any card I've ever had. At least as far as I know. And you can see here, I had to set the power target at 114%. Whoops, oh boy. That was a mistake. 114%, which is the max for this card. I got the GPU clock up to plus 225 and the memory clock up to plus 1200. Okay, so that's a lot higher than I thought I was going to get it. Now, I ended up doing that while I was out here. I originally had this at plus 200 on the GPU and plus 1000 on the memory. And the other thing too is I have this up to 17% here. Okay, the voltage. But I ended up getting it up to 225 and 1200. It seems to be running stable. So, and then that's what I ran these a few times, several times actually. And I was able to get the 4K up to 60 frames per second. 1440, I was able to get it up to 108 frames per second on Furmark, and at 1080p, I was able to get it up to 160 frames per second. Excuse me, I just ate. Alright, but my main thing was trying to get this thing running at 4K at 60 frames per second steady, and I was able to do that on an RTX 2070. Okay, now that's OpenGL, so that's not really DirectX, you know, but nonetheless, took me a really long time to finally get that to 60 frames per second. All right, so, you know, and the reason why I did this wasn't really for my own benefit. It was for, well, my own personal knowledge, yes. So in that sense, it was for my benefit. But I kept hearing on YouTube that, oh, blah, 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 the RTX 2070 is so expensive. It should be like $100 cheaper, you know, blah, 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 blah. Okay? Just hearing just constant complaints about NVIDIA and their pricing. And it's just like ridiculous, you know, because it doesn't make any sense, you know. First of all the RTX cards perform very well. That's point number one. Point number two, all the RTX cards do perform better than the last generation. So forget about the price per performance. That doesn't mean anything. I mean, if the card is still performing better, even if you're paying the same price, then it's better, right? So, you know, I don't really understand the logic there. Because that's like saying, well, okay, the GTX 1080 was selling for what, $499, I think it was, in the end. So, okay. So you buy an RTX 2070 for the same price, because you can get the RTX 2070 for actually under $499 for the lowest edition. But if you want to get like a slightly, you know, overclocked one, say like the XC edition here, which you could probably get on sale for maybe a little over 500, maybe 505 if you look or wait. I got mine for $535 with tax, so that's what I paid for the XC. So if a GTX 1080 is selling for $499, then you're going to pay the same price, $535, because we got 7% and 6% sales tax here. So, you know, so whatever, you're going to be paying about the same. But the RTX 2070 performs better than the 1080. 100% guaranteed. Because I have a 1080 Strix edition, which is overclocked, highly overclocked. And my RTX 2070 Black edition was performing better than it. And I paid, well, those things are only running for like $480. So that's lower priced, better performer. So it's a win-win. There should be no complaints. No complaints. The RTX 2070 is a great performer for the price. And it has the RTX features if you care about them, which I do. So, so enough about that. The RTX 2070 is a great value. Okay? It's a great performer. It's a good bang for your buck. So I don't know where they get that it's not worth the money. I don't really understand that at all. It's plenty worth the money. Okay, the next thing that I want to show you guys though is, well, I'll just get this out of the way. So I have GFX bench, and there's two benchmarks here. Well, you can't really see it probably here. Let me see if I can make this a little bigger. Uh-oh. Oh, yeah. So I ran it in DirectX 12 high tier, which is basically a 1440p test, and I got 98 frames per second. Okay, which is pretty good at 1440p. So it's high graphics settings, and then this one DirectX 12 normal tier is a 1080p, high quality. 1080p, and I was getting 119 frames per second. Unfortunately, they don't have a 4K test, so at least from what I understand. I didn't see any anyway. So maybe DirectX 11 they do? Let me see. Yeah, it doesn't really have a 4K test. It's all 1440p or 1080p, so that was kind of unfortunate. So, yeah, so not bad. 1440, 98 frames per second, so that's pretty good. I mean, I don't know if any of you understand this test, but that's pretty good deal. And that was not with it clocked up to where it is right now. Okay. So let me make that clear. All the benchmarks that you're going to see are with this at 200 and 1000. So you could probably get it. I mean, you could probably get a whole lot, at least, I don't know, 5-6 more frames per second, if not more, with it clocked up here. Okay. I'm just showing you here that you can get it up this high. Alright. Now the other thing that I want to show you is people were also saying that the 1080 Ti, is the god of all cards. If you put all the cards together, the 1080 Ti is the best bang for your buck at its price point. And that might be true, because you get the 11 gigabytes versus 11 gigabytes of VRAM in there, which is pretty decent. It's not really needed though, not really needed, because you can get by just fine with 8 gigabytes of RAM. But the one thing about that is that it is the last generation, right? So I have this clocked up, the memory clocked up to 1200, and the GPU clocked up plus 225. So I can never get like a proper clock speed. Does it say it on here? Yeah, see here it doesn't even say it. It just says plus 225. I mean, it's saying here, I guess the core is at 1845 right now. That says boost though, so I don't know if that's this, this plus this. So I guess it's running at 1845. The memory, it says 2050 here. But as you can see, where is it here? So the memory here, is at 8200 megahertz, which is 8.2 gigahertz. And then here, the GPU core went up to 2115. So that's pretty high. But this is what I want to show you here, this 524.8 gigabits per second on the memory bandwidth. That is crazy for a RTX 2070. Now there might be overclocked versions of this card that can go higher. I don't know. I only have a 2-fan solution here, so I did mess with the fan curve here though. So this is how I have my fan curve. So it's probably running at 50%, like 100% of the time. As you can see, the GPU temperature is down to 27, so it's pretty cool. Because, I want to keep it cool, so that when you start doing things, it's already got the fans running, And then as it gets, hotter and hotter, the fans are going to get, faster and faster. So, actually, this should be up a little higher, I think. So, so far, though, I haven't seen the temperature get above 70 in anything that I've done. Okay? And that's the honest to God truth. At least, like I said, in anything that I've done, which was benchmark games and then do the firm mark. I don't even know if it has the temperature here. Yeah, right here, max GPU temperature was 59, or excuse me, yeah, 59 degrees Celsius here. So that's pretty nice, especially at 4K. Now again, I know these tests are only like 2 minutes long or something, but I did them repeatedly, because I was trying to get it up to the 60 frames per second. And then I did these after I did this one, so it seems to be like pretty much consistent with that 59. Here you can see that I have my processors running at, 5 gigahertz on all cores. It's 49.99, because it's kind of adjusting the voltage there slightly. But it's running at pretty much 5 gigahertz. Pretty steadily. I have a water cooler on it, so the temperatures stay pretty good at stock, or at idle. They do go up like when they get worked. But here I wanted to show you something. Now here you can see that I have this thing up to 265.7 gigatexels a second, which is pretty good. And the bandwidth's at 524 gigabits per second. Now, I'm going to show you online what the Founders Edition is and what the stock is here, because I don't think it has it on the box. So here's the EVGA edition that I have right here. The one that we're talking about, the XC, okay? Now, EVGA's got it for 529. I got mine at Micro Center a little cheaper. It was on sale. So I ended up paying like $535, I think, with tax. So if we look at the specs here, though, let me see if they have more specs. I thought there was a way that I could see. Yeah, here it is. All right, so as you can see here, the normal boost clock is 620, and I have it up to 1845 right now. Of course, it goes higher. I don't know why this says 1635 here. I don't really understand that. Like why it doesn't change. But this is what I have it clocked at right now. It's running at 1845. I'm pretty sure that's what that means. And then the memory clock is at 14,000. Think about that. That's only 7,000 megahertz. And oops. Oh my God. What did I do? Oh no. Windows snapping. And as I showed you here, I have it running at 8200 megahertz, so that's 1200 as it's showing there more. Okay, so that's quite a bit. And the memory bandwidth this thing has stock is only 448 gigabits per second. So right now, it's running at 524 gigabits per second. I mean, that is quite a difference. Okay, that's what, about 75 or 80 gigabits per second difference. Now again, I'm not saying that I did some kind of crazy overclock here. I don't know. I didn't compare my overclocking to anybody else. All I was looking at was the stock numbers versus what I could get it here. Okay? So that's quite a difference, you know? And this is only a black edition. Okay? It's got no RGB lighting or anything. But it is an XC, which I don't know what that means. I think it just has a higher wattage rating because my regular black edition card, this one here, I could only get this thing here up to 110%. So that was kind of disappointing for the black edition, you know. So apparently they gave this one a 14% boost. So not bad, I guess, or 4% more boost, I guess, on the power target. So now I don't know what the base is, so that number's kind of like elusive anyway, because you don't know what the 100% was, you know. So anyway, the higher this is, the better for overclocking. So so anyway, I got this baby up to 524.8 gigabits per second on the memory, so that's pretty freaking nice. Now I want to show you all. I want to also compare this thing to some other cards. Okay. Now here's the Founders Edition RTX 2070, and they got it for $599. Okay. So let's look at the specs on this one, which is probably going to be the same. So the boost clock starts out at 1710 on this one, okay, which is a little more than the black edition, which is 1620. And again, 448 gigabits per second, because the memory is the same, 14 gigabits per second, you know, on this one. So I got mine up to, you know, 8,000, 8,200 megahertz. Or excuse me, I didn't mean to say that. I got, this is at 448 gigabits per second. So mine's at 524. Now they don't tell you what the memory clock is. On this. But again, you're paying $600 for the Founders Edition, which is only a 2-slot card like this one, and I paid $535 for mine, and I have it clocked up. Now that doesn't mean you can't clock this one up, but again, you're paying more money for what, you know? The Founders Edition is more expensive, of course. Now let's look at a GTX 1080. Or excuse me, where's the 20? Sorry, I didn't have a 1080 on here. Let me get a 1080 on here. 1080. Let's look at the 1080, which they said the Founders Edition was $549. I guess when they stopped selling it, I thought it was down to $499. But anyway, that's what it says here. So let's look at the specs for this. Now the base clocks on this are going to be not really that relevant, I guess, but the base clock was 1607, the boost was 1733. It had 2,560 CUDA cores, whereas the sorry, what was that again? 2560, and the 2070 was 2304, so it's less. The 2070 has less CUDA cores. Okay. And it outperforms, the 2070 has less CUDA cores and outperforms the GTX 1080. And the 1080's memory bandwidth is only 320. So the 2070 I got clocked up here is 200 gigabits per second, 204 gigabits per second faster on the memory. So that's a pretty ridiculous difference. Very ridiculous. So forget it. So again, this is $549. I paid $535 for mine with tax, and it blows this out of the water right now if you're looking spec for spec. Now you can overclock this, I'm sure, but I still highly doubt you're going to get it up to this kind of performance. You know? Alright, now let's look at the 1080 Ti that everybody goes crazy about. Okay? Now, here they have it listed for $699. Okay? $699 for a 1080 Ti. Now let's compare these numbers I got on the screen. Okay, these numbers here with the specs of this 1080 Ti. Now again, it doesn't translate necessarily equally because you have a lot more CUDA cores, right? I understand that. Okay? So here you have like 1,200 and change more CUDA cores. Okay? That's a lot. Okay, 1,200 more CUDA cores. Alright, versus the, well, right here it says, actually it tells you 2304. So, you know, what's that, 1,000? 1,280. Okay, so 1,280 more cores here. Okay. The memory here, though, is only 11 gigabits per second. This is a 352-bit bus, so that's a quite bigger bus. This memory bandwidth, though, for the 1080 Ti is only 484. Okay, so it still doesn't even come close to this. 524.8 gigabits per second. Okay. Now I wish they went further and told you the gigatexels and all that stuff, but they don't really give you that information. You could probably configure it through math, but I don't have the equation for that right now. So, you know, this thing in essence is as fast as a GTX 1080 Ti, right? The only thing that's holding it back is the CUDA cores. Okay? And we can kind of get a glimpse of that by looking at some benchmarks, right? Now, I don't have a 1080 Ti to benchmark, so we'll have to go online. Now, the 2080 Ti, or the 2080 here, is $800. Although this is the Founders. Remember, we're looking at the Founders Edition. So, you know, you have to take off, like, for the 1080 Ti, take off $100, okay? Because you were able to buy these from third-party guys for $599, and the 2080 you can buy for $699 from third-party, okay? So let's get that straight. Now this one didn't have much leeway. Third-party sellers were still only selling these for, I think, $499, so, and up. So, you know, this didn't really have much play here. But the RTX 2070, though, you can get that for like $475 if you get it on sale. So let's look at the 2080 and see how far we are from it. Okay, so again, you can overclock this. I understand that. But this one now is not much further from the 2070. Because here, 2944 CUDA cores, 2304. That's only 640 difference on the CUDA cores. Okay, now it's got the RTX ops, which we don't care about that right now, I don't think, because we're not doing RTX stuff. We're just focusing on the basic raw power, you know, GTX power, let's say. Okay, not the ray tracing and stuff. Here the boost clock, this one's at 1800, so this one still doesn't come close to the 1845 here. Okay? And then this has only got a 256-bit bus, just like this one. I think it has it here somewhere. Where is it? Well, anyway, you can see it here, 256-bit. All right, now this one again, this one only starts at 448 gigabits per second on the memory because it's the same memory, basically, 8 gigs of GDDR6. So, you know, and again, you could probably overclock this to come maybe to these numbers. I don't know. But really, the only thing this has going for it is the ray tracing and the CUDA cores, which are not really that many more. So for $534, for $535, you're getting 1080 Ti performance. Almost. Or at least almost RTX 2080 performance. So I don't understand how you could say there's not a good bang for your buck here. I mean, that's really awesome, you know? So I don't know what else I can say. Now here they have the textures. Okay, so here they actually have it listed on the EVGA site. Okay, so I got this up to, this says 14,000 megahertz effective. Obviously mine is clocked up higher than that because I have mine up to the 8200. So I think that means 7,000. So I think what you have to do is go 8200 times 4, no, times 2. So mine would be effective 16,400 megahertz effective. Okay, my memory. All right, so again, 233.3 gigatextiles. I guess that's per second. I have mine up to 265. So that's over 30 gigatextiles a second more. So that's not bad, I guess. You know, you're talking about gigatextiles, thousands of textiles per second. So not bad. Now I don't know about this thing here. This says pixel fill rate. Now they don't have that listed here. So I can't really compare that. You'd have to go online and compare it to someone else. Yeah, so this thing's running pretty freaking fast. So let's get to the benchmarks now, because I'm sure I'm boring you now with the talking. And I just have all this up to confirm, okay, that this says the same thing as this says the same thing as this thing says basically the same thing as this. And you can see that it's the RTX 2070. This is not an overclocked edition. You can see that it's running at, I don't know why it says 2050 here. I don't really understand that. Maybe this still isn't reporting the, because here it says clock speed offsets at 1200 on here, so it's definitely, and here it says 8200, so I'm not really sure. Oh, this is times 4. Oh yeah, duh. I'm sorry. This is times 4. 2050 times 4. So that would be 8200. So that is correct. Had a long day. So that really, I don't know what else to say here as far as like these things go. You know, if you look this up, it just shows you here. but again, it doesn't really compare. Okay, well, it does kind of have some extra information here. So the pixel fill rate is 103 base, and I have mine up to 118, so that's not bad. That's 50 gigapixels extra. I don't know about this teraflop. I don't know how to do that. I think AIDA64, but I don't think I have that installed anymore. I think I uninstalled that. Yeah, you can. I think AIDA64, you can test that. So, yeah, there's really nothing else here that I think will really matter. Yeah, so, alright, so I think we're done looking at the EVGA stuff. This is the other black edition that I have. It's going to have similar specs. It just doesn't have the overclocking power, you know, that this XC edition has. You can still overclock it, but just not as much as this one. I wasn't able to get anywhere near this without it crashing. All right, so let's just minimize that. So let's get into the benchmarks here. I guess I can close out all this stuff because you don't really need to see this anymore. Let me close out a cam here. I can keep this stuff up here just for information's sake, I guess. But yeah, I'm very pleased. Now, the other thing that I wanted to mention too about this is I have this thing clocked up in the most unideal situation. Okay? I didn't uninstall the drivers and clean out the drivers and reinstall them. I still got all my background processes running, as you can see here. I mean, I don't know what all this junk is here, but all this crap is running in the background. You know, again, the only thing I shut down was like Steam and Ubisoft and all those things, but you know, I still got my antivirus running, NVIDIA running. You know, I didn't clean anything out. Like I didn't stop any processes, okay, except for what I just mentioned. So you could probably overclock this thing even more than this. And I didn't play around with the voltages or anything like that. All I did was use this app right here. That's it. Just this app alone. You know? You probably had this covered up the whole time. Sorry about that. I forgot about the camera bit. Yeah, so yeah, so this is like real world, real life kind of situation. This isn't like a white glove lab, you know, like Gamers Nexus or you know any other of those other ones who you know use a fresh install of Windows and clean out the drivers from the system. This is running on a sloppy machine. Okay, so let's look at some benchmarks, and again, the benchmarks that I did was with this clocked at 200 on the GPU and only 1,000 on the memory. Okay, so I apologize for that, but I wasn't going to redo all the benchmarks. And the only reason that I redid this whole clock thing is because when I was bringing my computer out here to the garage, I shut everything down without closing anything out. And I think when I did that, it just kind of, I don't know, maybe it just thought that the computer crashed or something. I don't know. And everything just got reset to 0. So I had to like redo all that. So I was able to actually get it higher. So, you know, there you go. So let's go ahead and look at this, and I'll explain what I did here. Again, I apologize for this not being, more professional, I guess you could say. Let me see where we can start here. Okay, so this you already seen. What is going on here? Alright, so you already saw that. That's what I just had. Yeah, I don't think I need to show you this anymore. Like, that's the XC edition card. If that's a better looking one. I did want to show you the this is the regular black edition. Now there's a number in the model number here, okay? Now the XC edition has an 1100 number here. Okay, and the regular black edition, the really low one, has a 2000 number here. So I think when you buy a 2070, you're going to want to look for the 1100 number here, because I think that one is probably the better. Although I think recently they said that they're going to send all the same chips. Like, this was when they still had like a better chip, two different chips. One that was not so great at overclocking, one that was better at overclocking. So the XC edition, I think, was the chip that was able to be overclocked more than, the regular black edition. So look for the 1100 number. That may change, though, in time, but probably what's in stock right now, you're going to want to look for that 1100 number in the right here, okay, in the model number. It's probably going to be a better GPU chip. That's just a guess. You can research that some more if you want. Anyway, so let's get to the benchmark. So again, these benchmarks are not at these clock settings. These benchmarks were done at lower clock settings, except for the fur mark. Okay, the fur mark was at these settings. And I was able to get 2160p at 2 times AA at 60 frames per second. So that was my goal. Once I reached that goal, I stopped there. Okay? So let's just look at some 3D mark here. Now this again is not at the present clock settings, but we can just kind of look. So I did Firestrike. I got 21,901. And again, I was really mainly looking at these frames per second, because that's all I care about, really. Me personally, I only care about frames per second. I don't really care about the score, because I'm never going to beat anybody out there who does ice, nitrogen cooling and extreme water cooling on their graphics cards. I'm never going to, go to that length to do any of that. So I got 116 frames per second and 98 frames per second on the test here. And I think here my clock went up to 2070. Okay. Which was pretty good at the time. Then I went ahead and did Firestrike Ultra, which is 4K DirectX 11. As you can see, Kingpin and all these guys, they hit 31,946. Now, of course, they use a crazy CPU. I wish they would just have just a GPU score, But I ended up getting 5936, 31 frames per second, and 20 frames per second. Now, those of you who don't know much about 3D Mark, take these benchmarks with a grain of salt, okay? Because they don't really reflect the performance that you're going to get in games. Okay? 3D Mark is basically a very heavily graphically intensive, calculation intensive benchmark. Okay, it's going to work your card to death. So, and of course, I guess when they made it, they want to future-proof it, you know, so that they don't have to keep redoing it every year, except for just do drivers updates or something. So this thing still is horrible when it comes to graphics cards. Even my 2080 Ti doesn't really get a very high frames per second on these things. So, you know, so this is decent, you know, I think. What did I do here? Double it? Yeah, I went and did a double here. I thought I erased them. So here I just wanted to show you how high the temperature got. So the highest temperature here, I didn't bother with this section because that was so short. But the highest during this longer section here, it was 55 degrees at 99% load. You know, GPU went up to 2000, pretty much the same all the way across. Then I did Skydiver, which is just basically a 1080p DirectX 11, I think. Oh yeah, right here, DirectX 11. Yeah, 1080p though, I think. I don't think it's 1440. It should be 1080p. And I got a 54,281, and it just killed this test. I mean, it destroyed it. I mean, 327 frames per second and 394 frames per second. So it really was like, you know, yeah. So the GPU here got up to 2085, and the memory was at 2000 at the time. And the highest temperature here was 56 degrees. CPU was 55, and the GPU load was only 92 here. Times by Extreme, now that's 4K DirectX 12. Again, got nearly 30 frames per second on first test, 27 frames on a second. You know, GPU got up to 2055. And I think I did this graph too. This one got up to 60 degrees at 100% load. So, you know, a little warmer. And then regular time SPI, which is just DirectX 12 at 1440. 10,190. And I got a 64 frames per second and 57 frames per second with the clock going up to 2055. And this one, the temperature went up a little bit more, 63 degrees at 99% load. This is a pretty long test. I don't know if it's... They had longer stretches, so, you know, it's going to get a little warmer. So that's pretty much of 3D Mark. I mean, I guess I should have went online and kind of compared to other things. I do have a couple 2080 Ti tests here. Far Cry 5, New Dawn, Ghost Recon, and The Division. Mainly all the 4K tests. So I did Kona Exiles first when it was during that free weekend. I don't really know what I had it clocked up at the time. It might have been the 200 on the GPU and 1000 on the memory. It definitely wasn't higher than that. So as you can see here, I don't know, during the beginning, during the cutscene, it was like 11 frames per second, kind of ridiculous. So obviously that's not optimized. So it quickly went up to 56. Now this is at 4K, okay? I'm running this game at 4K. So it was doing pretty good. You know, I got 95 here on this cutscene. Still the cutscene, a very long cutscene. As you can see, in the 50s there. 60's there, 65 now, no more cutscenes, so I was at 65 here. Now this is at 4K, remember, and this is on like probably ultra settings, the highest settings it can go. So it's running pretty good. For the most part, I was pretty much at 60. It wasn't until I got near like that water area on the next video where things started to, it started getting a little more difficult to keep it at 60. So here it's still hovering, upper 50s, 60, it's back and forth depending. Like 55 to 60. Now here, when I was in my inventory, whenever I went in my inventory, it dropped. So go figure. I don't understand that. But when I was out here chopping, again, it's up like mid to upper 50s. Occasionally, like it would drop down. I don't know why. I mean, it's just, this game is just not very well optimized, I don't think. But like in the water here, it was like up and down depending on where I was looking. But again, it's kind of all over the place, really. It's just, I don't really understand. And I don't believe it was because of the overclock. So depending on which island I was on or where I was running to, it was quite different, Like here it's like, I mean, the graphics really aren't that good in this game. So I don't know why it would be running at 35 frames per second. There really is no reason for that. In my personal opinion, I played plenty of games at 4K, and I played games that were way more beautiful than this, and got better frames. But, for the most part, I mean, it was playable frame rates. Again, when you're in the foliage, it just got worse. In my house here, it was like pretty much around 60. Here in the grass, it was down a little bit. Again, I don't know why it's so low, because the game really does not look that great to me. In my house at night, it's at 60 frames per second. And this was playing for, I don't know, how long was I playing for? This was, well, it was over an hour, because this one's an hour long, I guess, so 1 hour and 10 minutes, yeah, so, So out here, it was good. Once you got into these forested areas, went down a little bit, maybe down to the 30s, 40s. Again, I don't know why, because this game really is not that good looking. Don't really understand. It shouldn't be performing this badly. This game is like, I don't know. I didn't really like it that much, to be honest with you. But it's, it's definitely playable. And at 1440, I should have done a test at 1440, but you're definitely not going to have a problem at 1440. If this thing's running like, from 35 to 65 frames per second, then 1440, it's definitely not going to have a problem. So, not bad at 4K, though. So, that's it for Conan. And again, that wasn't clocked up where I have it today. So let's do Mankind Divided. Let's see how we can do this here. Oh, good, you can open up a new window. So I just want to show you the 2080 Ti. If do I have it in here? Oh, I don't have it in here. Crap. Thought I had that. Let me see. Oh, I must have erased it. Here it is. Let's see. I don't have it. I don't know what I did with my 2080 Ti results. I did have them, but I guess I must have erased them. Apparently. Yeah, anyway. Oh, whatever. I'll look at the 2080 Ti later. Alright, so Mankind Divided, everybody knows that that game is just horrible when you're doing benchmarks. So what I did was... I don't know why I got two here. Why do I have a video? Oh, because it wouldn't take a screenshot, I think that's why. Yeah, so I have it had it at very high settings, okay? I guess I showed it here. Whoops. What did I do here? I didn't show the settings here. That was weird. Anyway. So anyway, here, this is at very high settings on 4K. I got 26.2. Okay, which that's very low, obviously. But my 2080 Ti didn't really perform that well either. And I really am kind of upset that I don't have my 2080 Ti results here. Must have erased them or something. Yeah, must have. They're either on another computer or I deleted them for some strange reason. Sorry about that. Yeah, I don't see it here. Alright, well, anyway, let's just get rid of that. So, again, this is at very high, 26.2. Again, my goal was to really try to get to 60 frames per second at 4K. Now, this game is just hard for any card to get the 60 frames per second. I can tell you that for a fact. And then here's 1440p. I got 51.5 frames per second average. That's at very high settings, so that's pretty good. Not bad at all, actually. Okay, that's kind of an outlier, though. Just like Ghost Recon Wildlands. I mean, that's another one that's just kind of ridiculous. I'm just giving you the 2080 Ti as a kind of a comparison. That's why I wanted to show you that. So Far Cry 5. So this is what I had of that 4K. Hmm? Huh? No, I cannot right now. I'm busy. Can you please go now? No. Alright. Anyway, I got this on Ultra, as you can see. Okay, so I wasn't skimping out. You know, I wanted to push it. And it got average 53 frames per second. So that's not bad. That's pretty good. At 4K we're talking about here, you know. 4K. So let's see what the GTX, the RTX 2080 Ti got here. Hopefully I got the results. So let's see if everything's the same here. 4K. Ultra. Same thing basically. Okay. So, and we have, so the 2080 Ti got 73 frames per second at 4K. Okay, on Far Cry 5, so that's pretty nuts. Okay, so now the 2080 Ti is the top card out there. So, you know, this one got 53. So that's not too bad, only being 20 frames per second less. You know, again, not that that means a whole lot. You have to go online and look at other comparisons, but I would say that's a win. 53 frames per second at 4K Ultra. Alright, so let's go to the next one here, Far Cry New Dawn, since the 2080 Ti has that on here. So, let's see here. Let me see. Alright, so let's see what we got here. I didn't put the settings on here. Okay, so... Okay, so this one... Okay, it does tell you here, so that's a good thing. So, Far Cry New Dawn at 4K Ultra, VSync off, I got 55 frames per second. So, you know, you would expect it to probably perform pretty similar to the Far Cry 5 since it's the same game basically. So the 2080 Ti got a average of 76 frames per second. Okay, now I didn't have the trust me, this is 4K because I wouldn't have done a test otherwise. I couldn't find the other screenshot I took. So again, you're only 20 frames per second off at ultra settings, so that's pretty good. Okay, so I'd say that's a win. Because, you know, I don't think a 1080 Ti is going to do much better than this. You know, to be honest with you. Alright, so what's next here? So what's the next game here? Ghost Recon, that's a pretty rough one. Where's Ghost Recon? I know I did it. Now this one I did in several different resolutions. Let's see what I did this one on. So this one I did, it's on custom. I hate it when it does that. I'm pretty sure this is Ultra, okay? At the the 2080 Ti. Okay, so the 2080 Ti got see, it says custom here. I don't know why. So the 2080 Ti on Ultra got 46.7 frames per second. So that tells you how crazy Wildlands is on Ultra. It's pretty nuts. Okay? So 46 frames per second. That's on Ultra. Now what did the 2070 Overclock get? So here it is at 4K. Everything's on Ultra. Let me just make sure this is pretty much similar. Yeah, it should be the same. Okay. So let me get to the results here. So there you go. So this is the overclocked XC RTX 2070. Now this was again when it was clocked lower than what I have it now. Okay? And it got 35.6 frames per second average. So that's only 10 frames per second difference from the RTX 2080 Ti. But that's probably a big difference when you're talking about this game, because, you know, it probably takes a lot to go up in 2 more frames per second increments. But still, you know, I would say that's a win. You know, it's still playable. Some people don't like it because of the minimum 29 there, but, you know, not a bad average. Alright, let's go to the next one here. What is it? The Division. Now the Division is going to be one that's kind of a little messed up, because I was having problems with the Division recently. It kept crashing. Not because of the card. It just was crashing anyway, no matter what card I used. Well, let me go back to Wildlands real quick, because I did do a whole bunch of settings here. So Ultra was 35 frames per second. And all I did was turn it down to high here on 4K. Right? 4K high. Okay. And just from turning it down just one step, I ended up getting 55 frames per second. That's crazy, huh? At 4K. So 4K high, 55 frames per second. So that's pretty good. Very good, actually. I wish I had the 2080 Ti results on that, because it probably would have been really good. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped the very high. I also did very high as well. So let's see what we got there. 49.82 on very high. So 35 on ultra, 49 on very high, and 55 on high. So not too shabby. Now what did I get with QHD? Now I did 1440 and 1080 as well. So 1440 on high, on ultra was still pretty nuts. This game is just... Phew. So ultra 1440 was 57 frames per second. So not too bad on ultra. The game still looks beautiful. And then very high, just turning it down one step, we went all the way up to 84 frames per second. The bugs. So that was quite impressive, I thought. So 1440p, 84 frames per second. And again, that's not with the card clocked up as much as it is now, you know, which is much higher than I had it on here. So not bad. And then 1080p, Ultra. Okay, 1080p. Ultra. Look at that. 72. So still, even at 1080p, it still makes the card work like crazy, you know? The Ultra is just ridiculous on this game. So I got 72 frames per second on Ultra at 1080p, so I would say that's pretty good. Turn it down one step though, very high. Very high at 1080p. Boom, look at that. 109 frames per second. So that's pretty good on very high settings because the game still looks very good. So, you know, not too bad, man. This card, overclock it, it's pretty nice. Alright, so we're going to go on to the Division because that's the only other one I have right here for the 2080 Ti. So, again, 2080 Ti, 4K, everything's turned up to Ultra basically. And I got an average frames per second of 68.8. Okay, that's on Ultra, 4K Ultra, 2080 Ti. All right. And what did I do here? So the game was not stable. It took me a while to get the game even running right. And again, it wasn't because of the overclock. It was just because of the game is just, I don't know, they updated it and it didn't work right after that. I don't really understand what happened. I keep sending the crash reports, but they didn't fix it. Hey, what's up, Mitch? How you doing? It's evening here now. I guess I'm having an okay evening. The kids are out there playing. It looks dark out there, but I got lights out there. So pretty much here, I pretty much did it. I'm pretty sure the same settings as the 2080 Ti. Let's compare. I mean, I didn't. So it looks like. Yeah, high, ultra, all high. I don't know about this post effects, though. Got on here. Okay. Yeah, I went and scrolled down a little bit here just so you could see, I guess, the important stuff, basically. So I have to wait until I scroll down here. Okay, so yeah, so everything's pretty much the same, it looks like. High. Oh, the spot shadows was on Ultra. Crap. I missed that one. I mean, I don't know how much that's really going to change anything, but this was off. That was on. Resolution's at 100. Sharpening's at 70. Okay, so this is probably the thing that I missed. Well, what are you going to do? Anyway, I don't think that's going to change it much, but maybe. So I ended up getting an average of 49.9 at 4K Ultra with just that one setting. Well, it's still on Ultra. This one I had to manually change, I think, to Ultra because I was pretty much ramping everything up on the 2080 Ti. Because even if you put it on Ultra, some stuff says high, even if you can put it on Ultra. So the setting that I have right here is actually when you just change it to Ultra. So if you want to get technical, it is on the Ultra setting. So I got nearly 50 frames per second. So I would say that's a win, considering the 2080 Ti got 68.8. You know, so that's still only 20 difference, and you're two tiers down on a card. So I would say that's pretty nice. You know, didn't get 60. So I guess that's it for the 2080 Ti. Alright, let's go to the next game. It gets better, don't worry. We did have some games that were pretty decent. So what did I do so far? Alright, so Forza Horizon. I did that in let's see here. So here I have it at 4K. Everything's on Ultra, as you can see. Or actually, yeah, everything's on Ultra. I'm scrolling down to show you. Okay. FXAA is on there. And the SSO, the SS, where is it? SSAO quality is on Ultra. Okay. Again, everything's on 4K. So, and 4K Ultra results were, let's see here, 62 frames per second. Alright, Mitch, thanks for stopping by, man. Take it easy. I overclocked my video card, so that's what I'm talking about right now. Just showing some benchmarking results. So here I got 62 frames per second with everything on Ultra. Again, at the old clock settings. Okay. So I would say that's not bad. That's pretty good. Let's see what else we got here. I don't know what all this other stuff is here I got. So I ran it again, I think, with VSync on and no VSync on, and wanted to see if there was a difference there. So VSync is off here, so I ran it again. I got 61. Everything's on Ultra, as you can see. And then with VSync on, I got 56. Okay, so that's with VSync on. So it is going to affect your frames if you put VSync on. Now, that won't, I don't think if you put on G-Sync or FreeSync, well, G-Sync in this case, I noticed when I was using G-Sync that it didn't play around with the frames too much. This was with my TV. I did all these recordings with my TV, so my TV is a little finicky when it comes to VSync. It's pretty like strict, you know, so you know that's the only caveat there. Okay, so that's not bad for 4K. Let's see here. I did Yakuza 0. I was just playing around with that in 4K. As you can see here, 4K DirectX 11. I did have everything turned up on max. So I was getting pretty good, over 60 frames per second on that game. 81 there. 73 there. 71 there. 90 there. 110 in the bar when they were talking. 98 there. 60 frames when he was doing karaoke. 93. 80. So definitely ran this game with no problem at all. So that's not even an issue. I did do some Unigine benchmarks here. I mean, these benchmarks so much, it's ridiculous. Like here, again, you got to take this with a grain of salt because they just really work the 4K at 4 times AA, which is a lot for 4K. You don't really need to run 4K you don't really need AA with 4K, but I usually put it on 2. But in this case, I did 4 times to work it a little bit more. And I got 43.6 frames per second. So that was pretty good with 4 times AA. And then, let's see, I ran it again with no AA at 4K. And I got 51.5 frames per second. So that's pretty good at 4K. So again, I count that as a win. I did do 1440 with 8 times AA, 81 frames per second. That's pretty darn good. And then I did 1440 again with no AA and got 117 frames per second. So that's very good as well. So that was with Heaven. Superposition was a little different. Again, take these with a grain of salt, because 1080p Extreme always runs worse than the 4K optimized. So go figure. 4K optimized, I got average of 59 frames per second. So that's not bad. I would say that's a win. That's pretty darn good. So again, almost 60 frames per second at 4K optimized. 8K, I got 25. You know, I just wanted to try it out. Obviously, 8K is crazy. And then, but for this 1080p Extreme, it only got 44 frames per second average. So I don't understand that. That doesn't make any sense to me. So maybe that's at, I don't know, Ultra at 8 times AA. You know, equivalent if you're playing a game, I don't know. But that's not a bad score, actually. 44 average is not bad for the 1080 Extreme, because it really works the card to death. Superposition, I don't think I... Yeah, that was this anyway. So, you know, again, not bad. 4K optimized, 60 frames per second. Pretty good. I would say that's a win. Alright, so what do we got here? I did do an old game, Middle-earth, Shadow of Mordor, and World of Tanks, but I'll do those last. I did do, let's see, Shadow of the Tomb Raider and Rise of the Tomb Raider. They're kind of older games. 4K, FXAA. I did everything on very high with the HBAO plus, and I ended up getting an average of 58.69 frames per second. So that's pretty darn good, I would say, at 4K, you know, Rise of the Tomb Raider. And then I did a 1440, probably the same settings, 107.25. So that's not bad either for very high. And that was, let me see. That was, oh, look at that. I didn't even notice. So that was with DirectX 12 off. Crap. Now why was that off? Because I had it on before. Alright, well, yeah. Sorry about that. So this is DirectX 11. Very high. 58 frames per second. Now I don't think that's really going to be different, because the RTX cards are pretty much optimized now for DirectX 12, so I don't think it's going to change. But that's just my opinion right now. So anyway, yeah, so my apologies on that one. So DirectX 11, very high, 1440p, 107 frames per second. So maybe I'll run a benchmark while we're on here, not right now, but when we're done, and we'll see what the numbers come out at. I am recording, so that's going to take a performance hit. Um, Shadow of the Tomb Raider should have been DirectX 12. Yes, DirectX 12. So this was DirectX 12. Okay, so let me get over to the 4K. Oh yeah, I don't know why I didn't. Crap. Yeah, I only took the screenshot of the 1440. But anyway, the 4K and 1440 are the same here. Okay, I did have it set to Ultra. I only changed this here to BTAO. Okay, and the only reason I did that is because my other cards, when I was testing the other 2070, that's what I had that one at, and that's what I wanted to compare it to. So it's on the Ultra setting, and that's what it's set. Well, actually, if you put it on Ultra, I think it automatically goes to that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure. So that's the reason why I had it like that. So I think the only thing that I did here was put this on high, because this is usually normal, even when you put it on Ultra. So anyway, so this is what I had it on: Ultra, BTAO, high, Ultra, motion blur off, and then this on high, and then all these on. So there you go. All right, so let's see what I got here. Yeah, so so at 4K, I got 48 frames per second average. Okay, that's with everything on Ultra, with these settings right here. So that's pretty good. That's not bad. 48 frames per second. It's pretty decent. It's not 60, but it's pretty good. And then 1440p at the same settings, I ended up getting, 86 frames per second average. So that was pretty decent. Not bad. That's on Ultra. That's on the same settings. So not bad at all. Okay, and then also as a little added perk here, I ended up doing some gameplay in 4K and at 1440, and the reason why I did that was because the benchmark does not really reflect what you're going to get in the game. Okay, the benchmark again is a little harder for some reason on the card. It may not be way off, but it's not. I don't think it reflects the gameplay. You know what I'm saying? Then I did have a video in here, and I'm not sure why I erased it again, because I wanted to show you how far I went. But I played for a good long while. Okay, I started out from. I can show you the screenshots actually. So I started out at the cave here in the beginning of the game, and I kind of just like went through. I hate when it loads up like that. Have to wait. You can see pretty much I'm going through these scenes here. Okay, I played I don't know, probably a good hour, I would say. However long it takes to get from that cave through the town here. I did, walked around the town a little bit. I didn't kind of rush through either. I kind of walked around a little bit so that, I got a pretty good amount of, frames here. So, it's pretty decent. It's in the 50s consistently here in these scenes. It did drop down later on when you get into like the jungles. But it was running pretty good, at 4K. I mean, very good. I was impressed. Like here, you know, this spot is always kind of dips with every card that I have, where they have these vines and they were talking in the background. I'm not really sure why it does that. But you can still see here, even at these vines, it stayed in the 50s. And even here, usually it drops down a little bit here, but it stayed pretty good. Okay, now this is where it started dipping off in this jungle area here, pretty good. This is during the cutscene. So here it dropped down to like in the 40s. Walking through here it was 45. I think because there's a lot of shadowing going on there. 43, 41 when I came through the pipe. But you know, it starts to go back up once I get out again. And then out here it's in the 50s again. So yeah, it's not too bad. So I went pretty far. Again, with all this foliage in the background here, it dipped down a little bit. Pretty consistent though in the 50s for the most part. I went pretty far, as you can see. I went to the part where you had to dive under the water. Here it dipped down a little bit when she came up for the breath. I'm not sure why. But you know, again, still in the 50s, 60s there, 58, 51. So in this cave, it dipped down a few times, but most of the time it was pretty much in the 50s. So that's kind of, you know, what I did as a sample. You know, the average that I got with all those screenshots was 54. So, you know, I would say that's fairly accurate, you know, for the most part. At 4K, very high, so or whatever it was, ultra. So I would say that's a win. 54 frames per second at 4K, I'd say that's pretty darn good, you know. And then I also did 1440p. Don't just ignore like this. I don't know. This wasn't changing some of the data on here. But I was watching the frames per second when I was doing the game. I played it at 1440p for a while. Again, I went through a pretty good section of the game. And I ended up getting like a 99 average at 1440p at the same ultra setting. So that's pretty darn good. 1440p, 99 frames per second average. So, yeah, pretty nice. So, yeah, Shadow definitely ran pretty decent. Rise definitely ran decent, but that was DirectX 11. I apologize for that. The other one that I wanted to do was The Division. Did I do Ghost Recon Wildlands? Yeah, I showed you that, didn't I? The Division 2 I did. Again, 4K. High graphics quality. VSync off. And I got average of 55 frames per second when I ran the benchmark, so that wasn't too bad. It's pretty good. You know, not bad at all at high settings. 1440p at the same basic settings, 102 frames per second on high settings. So again, that's pretty darn good. So, and then 1080p, same basic settings, I believe, 149 frames per second. So you can definitely play at 1080p, 144 frames per second probably, for the most part, because that's the average, remember. So, you know, that's what's pretty nice here with these. You know, 4K, 55 frames per second. You know, not bad at all. So yeah, definitely I'd say that's a winner. I also did Middle Earth Shadow of Mordor since I got it for free from NVIDIA. So again, at 4K, everything's on Ultra. Okay, the maximum, pretty much. And I don't know why I left on depth of field and all that junk. Tessellation's on. So at 4K, I ended up getting 76 frames per second. So that was really nice, you know. Definitely cool. And then I ran it again. Well, I ran it twice. I got 76 and then 75. So there you go. And then 75 again. I didn't do 1440p. I'm not sure why, but I'd still say 75 frames per second at 4K is pretty good. So you're going to have a fun time playing that game in 4K with this card. And then I did the World of Tanks as well. I did all 3 resolutions. 4K I did low quality AA and no AA because they had 2 different settings. So I did 4K with no anti-aliasing. I ended up getting a score of 13,664 with an average frames per second of 79 frames per second at 4K, no AA, Ultra. So that's pretty darn good. I would say that's a winner. And then I did test it with AA. So no AA, 4K, Ultra 79. Pretty darn good. I did do low quality AA. That would probably be about like say 2 times AA or 4 times AA. I'm imagining some AA. So that's all you really need for 4K anyway. So middle. Okay, so some anti-aliasing here. I ended up getting a score of 11,233, a little lower, and still scoring 66 frames per second average. So that's 4K, some AA, 66 frames per second. So I would say that's a winner. You know, I wouldn't go any higher than that because, I mean, 4K you just don't do high anti-aliasing. There's just no point in doing that. I also did do a 1440 test. Both of these 1440 and 1080 were at high quality AA. I got a 22,000 score. You know, not that that means anything. And I ended up scoring 133 frames per second. So that's pretty darn good. 1440p, high quality AA, Ultra 133. Pretty good. So you can play online with those kind of numbers. And then 1080p, I think was just insane. 1080p, high quality AA, I scored a 33,692. And boom, look at that. 199 frames per second. 1080p HQAA Ultra 199. So you can definitely play that online without having any problems. Pretty darn good. So I found this article. I don't know if I really should do this, but PC Games N did some testing on a 1080 Ti. And let's see what they did here. They had like Heaven. Now they didn't really put here what kind of settings they had. No, that's Yeah, heaven. So this is what they got. Let me compare mine here with theirs. This is a 1080 Ti now. Okay. Now I did heaven. Where is it? 4K 4 times, and then I did none. All right. So, oh, sorry. This is how did that happen? So here's the heaven. 4K. 1080 Ti got 43 frames per second. I don't know. Here I have 4K at 4 times AA, and I got 43.6 frames per second. So this got the same score, at least the same frames per second as a 1080 Ti at the same resolution. This card is performing as good as a 1080 Ti, at least in this benchmark. So Time Spy, let's go check out Time Spy here. Let's go to 3D Mark here and compare. Time Spy. Where is it? Time Spy. Look. Now again, I'm just going by what they have here, right? So here's Time Spy. 10,190. There they only got 8,602. You know? Now, of course, this article is a year old, like a year, and you know, it was, I think, the beginning of last year is when they did it. But that's still besides the point. I mean, okay, so you could say maybe they optimized things a little bit more, but I don't think it's going to make that big of a difference, to be honest with you. I wish that they would have put, like, the other information here. That would have been nice. Now, what is the difference here? Why did they do this twice? Oh, 1080p. Yeah, they did have in 1080p, but I don't really care about that, I don't think. I don't think I did 1080p. Let me see. I only did 1440. So. And again, they're not telling you whether they have AA on here or not, so I don't know what the deal is here. I only did 1440 and got 81 frames per second. That's at 8 times AA. So that's pretty good. They didn't do any other benchmarks, unfortunately. And here at the end of their article, they say nothing else except the Titan X can come close to the incredible performance of the GTX 1080 Ti. And here they were saying it was expensive. But of course that was because of the mining craze. So the RTX 2070, I'm pretty sure, is performing nearly as good as a 1080 Ti. This overclocked here. And that wasn't even overclocked to where I have it now. So let's run heaven, okay? Let's run this heaven at 1080 with me recording and see what happens. Let me try it and see if we can get 167. Okay, let's see if we can get 167 here. Now see, again, they're not telling us what settings they have. Okay, but I'm assuming they have it on Ultra. That's what I would assume anyway. And I don't know if they have anti-aliasing on either, so I always put mine on 8 times. You know, I always run my benchmarks at the highest. So let's see what it gets on the highest possible settings here. And hope we don't crash. So forgive me if we crash. Now mind you, this is with me recording.